Hello again. Thanks for joining me. We've had 2 lectures on Hindu sacred texts categorized as Shruti, what's heard. And those consist of the Vedas, and including both the Samhitas and the Upanishads. These scriptures were the particular concern of Brahmin priests, and they represented an elite form of the religion, focused on ancient ritual and on meditative philosophy. Ordinary Hindus were more likely to look to Smriti, what is remembered, for guidance in their ordinary lives. Smriti encompasses a vast body of literature, but in the next 2 lectures, I'll introduce some of the key genres: epics, Puranas, and Dharma Shastras. But first, a caution. Hinduism is a religion characterized by astonishing diversity. There are a few statements, there are actually only a few statements that we could make about it that would be universally accepted. So, for instance, we might say that Smriti generally comes after Shruti, that they are thought to have human authors rather than divine origins, and that they are secondary in importance in Hinduism. But at the same time, we've seen how some Upanishads continue to be written into the early modern era, long after the composition of the Ramayana, the Mahabharata, and the laws of Manu, to name the 3 most significant Smriti. Some consider Vyasa, the legendary author of the Mahabharata, to be an incarnation of the god Vishnu, and the most popular beloved text in Hinduism, the Bhagavad Gita, though it's an excerpt from the Mahabharata, and so is clearly within the Smriti category, is treated like an Upanishad, and it's often considered as if it were Shruti. So those boundaries aren't quite as clear-cut as we might expect. Remember, Hindu sacred texts, like Hinduism itself, are very flexible and fluid. They resist strict classifications. In this lecture, we'll talk about the 2 Hindu epics, the Ramayana and the Mahabharata. These are mythic narratives of gods and kings from long ago, and Indians refer to them as itihasa, which means that's how it was. They're history-like texts, except they include a lot of interactions with the gods. They're mythical as well. Like the Shruti, these tales were originally oral compositions, but unlike the Vedic hymns, they were adapted and expanded and translated into vernacular languages over generations. Whereas correctly pronouncing the sounds of the ancient Sanskrit syllables of the Vedic hymns was considered more important than knowing what they meant. For the epics, it's the stories that matter. People know exactly what's happening when they hear these and hear them recounted. As we review some of the main characters and plot lines, I want you to keep in mind 2 things. First, even though some of the details may seem strange or even a bit bizarre, I want you to imagine what it would be like if you'd grown up with these tales. What if they were as familiar to you as, say, the stories of Adam and Eve, or Noah's Ark, or David and Goliath, Jonah and the whale? And you might imagine how Indians might react to stories of fire coming from heaven, of talking donkeys and walking on water and other things from the Western Bible. The second thing is I want you to listen for a thread that runs through all of these narratives. Okay, here comes one of those generalizations about Hinduism that I warned you about, but I'm pretty confident about this one. As the scholar Wendy Doniger says, the Hindus regard the epics both as great poems and also as great textbooks. We may think that they're about the war of the Bharatas and the battle between Rama and Ravana, but the Hindus think that they're about Dharma. It's actually all about Dharma. That's the thread that ties them together. But what exactly is Dharma? Dharma can be translated as sacred duty or morally upright behavior, but it's more than that. It's probably the closest term in traditional India to what we in the West might call religion. Yet it's not just a set of beliefs and practices. Rather, it's a conglomeration of principles that gives meaning and shape to all of life. And indeed, Dharma provides order throughout the cosmos. Dharma comes from a Sanskrit word that means to support or to uphold. Eventually, it was used to refer to the eternal laws that maintain the world, right? They uphold or support the world as we know it. Dharma is a manifestation of order, of harmony and truth. And although there are universal aspects to it, it's not the same for everyone. Your Dharma depends, to some degree, on your gender, your caste, your family situation, and your stage in life. Dharma is more straightforward in the shorter of the two epics, the Ramayana, where Rama is thought of as the ideal man and Sita the ideal woman. So we'll start there. And by the way, Ramayana means the way of Rama. The Ramayana, traditionally ascribed to a poet named Valmiki, appears to have been composed between 200 BCE and 200 CE, so 400 years there that it was added to or put together, probably composed by multiple individuals. It's a lengthy epic poem of about 25,000 verses, and so those are couplets, like 50,000 lines or so, and it's divided into 7 books, which makes it almost as long, almost twice as long as the Iliad and the Odyssey put together. The Ramayana begins with a framing story. The poet Valmiki is conversing with a divine seer named Narada. Valmiki asks if there are any truly superior men in the current age, and Narada tells him the story of Rama, the king of Kosala. Not long thereafter, Valmiki curses a cruel hunter, and in so doing, he invents a new form of Sanskrit verse. It must have been a particularly potent kind of curse that he gave. And then he's visited by the creator god Brahma, who commissions Valmiki to use this poetic form to tell the story of Rama. That's the story that he's just heard. So Valmiki does this, and then he teaches his epic poem to his disciples, especially the twins Lava and Kusha, who spread it far and wide. Okay, remember those two figures, Lava and Kusha. Eventually, King Rama himself hears of this epic, this story, and invites the twins to his court, where he hears a performance. So the story is about Rama, but Rama is also the audience for it. He's listening to a story about himself, and it takes place, this performance takes place as part of one of those legendary horse sacrifices that goes on and on for a year. And then after that, so this is still the introductory material in the Ramayana, after that follows the epic itself. The former king of Kosala, wishing to have a son, appealed to the gods with prayer and sacrifices. At the same time, various deities complained to Lord Brahma about a demon or an ogre named Ravana, who had been given the gift of being invulnerable to all attacks by the gods and was oppressing the world. Okay, so the gods couldn't really do anything about that because of this gift that he had, but they realized that this gift didn't make Ravana impervious to humans. So the great god Vishnu agreed to take on human form. He comes down to and is born to this earth. He takes on human form in order to defeat Ravana. And so he was born as Rama. In other words, Rama is an avatar of Vishnu. As a young man, Rama and his brother Lakshmana take a journey to save a sage from demons. And while they're away from court, they hear of a marriage contest for a woman named Sita, which means, the name means furrow. And she had been given that name because she'd been found as a baby in the furrow of a plowed field and had been adopted by the king. The test, the contest that would result in her marriage was to lift and to string a massive bow that had been given to the king by the god Shiva. Rama is the only contestant able to do this, and so he returned to the capital, Ayodhya, with Sita as his wife. She was the prize that was given for winning this particular contest. Years later, the old king wished to make Rama his successor, but one of his wives, who had long ago been promised 2 wishes, claimed one of those wishes at that very moment. And the wish she wanted was to make her own son the heir apparent, rather than Rama. And the second wish that she asked for, the second gift that she asked for, was she asked the king to exile Rama into the wilderness for 14 years. The king was brokenhearted, but he couldn't go back on his word. Remember, that's part of Dharma, about your duty to do the right thing. And kings, when they give promises, they're not allowed to go back on them. To do so would be to defy the duty of a king. And so Rama was exiled, but he was fairly happy to accept his homeless exile and demotion rather than see his father proven untruthful, right? He has this dharma that he has to follow as well in being obedient to his father. Sita and Lakshmana, not being able to bear life without Rama, accompanied him into the wilderness. Here we see several examples of dharma in action. Rama is the perfect son who sets aside his own feelings and ambitions to obey his father. and Sita shows herself to be the perfect Hindu wife, completely devoted to her husband. And I suppose Lakshmana shows the dharma of being the ideal brother as well, faithful and loyal to the end. But there's trouble ahead for the ideal couple of Rama and Sita. An ogress tries to seduce Rama and Lakshmana, and when she's rebuffed, she complains to her brother Ravana, the 10-headed demon king of the island kingdom of Lanka. Ravana sends a golden deer to lure Rama and Lakshmana away, and in their absence, he swoops in and kidnaps Sita, taking her back to Lanka on his flying chariot. Rama is devastated when he goes back home and finds Sita missing, and then he learns from a valiant vulture who had seen all of this the identity of her captor. Rama soon teams up with Hanuman, the monkey hero, and searches parties, and the search parties they send out hear reports that Sita is being held in Lanka. The story goes on and on, right? We'll continue. Hanuman takes a great leap over the ocean to the island of Lanka. This is traditionally thought of as Sri Lanka today. And there Hanuman finds Sita. He offers to carry her back because he can jump across, right? But she refuses, saying that she would prefer to be rescued by her husband. Okay, the ideal of modesty, the dharma of the perfect wife, requires that she only be touched by her husband. Hanuman causes all sorts of havoc in Lanka. He sets fire to the city with his tail, which had been set on fire by Ravana's guards. And then he runs through and everything goes ablaze. And then Hanuman leaps back to the mainland to tell Rama that he had found Sita. Next comes a long account of the war between Rama and Ravana, complete with a causeway across the sea built by monkeys. Hanuman is the king of he's the minister of the king of the monkeys. And they have a panoply of supernatural weapons that they use in this fight. And in the end, Ravana is defeated and killed. At this point, Ravana has been defeated and Sita is free, and you might expect a happy reunion between Rama and Sita. But then there's a twist, an unexpected twist, where Rama accuses Sita of having been unfaithful to him with Ravana. How could she have lived in his palace for nearly a year without having yielded to his force and charisma? Rama tells her that he has fulfilled his duty by avenging her kidnapping and killing Ravana, but that their marriage is over. Sita protests that she's innocent, and she offers to undergo public ordeal by fire to prove that. When she's vindicated, Rama welcomes her as his wife, explaining that he himself had never doubted her virtue, but he had to put her to the test to prove her innocence to others. Otherwise, people in the kingdom would be spreading rumors or talking about this. And so, with all of that past them, the couple returns in triumph to Ayodhya, the capital, where Rama's brother has agreed to step aside as king in favor of Rama. And they lived happily ever after. Or at least it seems like they should. Some versions of the Ramayana end there, but Valmiki's Sanskrit version has one more chapter. A few years later, Rama hears that there are rumors among his people doubting Sita's chastity when she was with Ravana. This was the problem that he had anticipated before. And uncomfortable with the uncertainty, Sita decides that she's going to leave, even though she's pregnant. She takes refuge with the poet Valmiki, he's the author of the epic, right? And she gives birth to twins who grow up to be disciples of Valmiki and who are, wait for it, none other than Lava and Kusha. So Rama's own lost sons are now reciting to him the story of his own life. Rama is joyfully reunited with his boys, and he invites Sita to return to the palace. Sita, however, calls upon her mother, the goddess Earth, to witness her long-standing devotion and purity, and then Sita descends into the earth as it opens to receive her. Sita may be a devoted Hindu wife, but she can insist upon her dignity when she has been wrongfully accused. Rama is heartbroken until the god Brahma reminds him that he's an incarnation of Vishnu and that he will once again be with his beloved wife in heaven at some point. There is much, much more, but this is at least the basic outline. Okay, keep in mind that the epic is about as long as the Bible. The Ramayana has a lot to say about dharma with regard to gender roles and kingship and how kings ought to organize their kingdom and protect their people. It says a lot about family relationships, about honor, interactions with the gods, and the place of sacrifice and violence and even poetry within a well-ordered, harmonious life. But what I want to point out is how integral this story is to Indian culture. Not many Hindus have read the Vedas, but hundreds of millions have read the Ramayana in vernacular languages such as Tamil in South India, or Bengali in Northeast India, or Hindi. Or they've heard versions of the Ramayana in storytelling in radio and TV. They've seen illustrations and reenactments. Indeed, Rama is widely worshipped in India. Remember, he's an avatar of Vishnu, so he belongs to the category of gods. And his influence isn't confined to India. Robert and Sally Goldman at UC Berkeley have noted that although it is little known to the average educated Westerner, the Valmiki Ramayana is arguably one of the 3 or 4 most important and most widely influential texts ever written. They put it at the level of the Bible and the Quran, in part because its impact upon art and literature and social thought has crossed national and even religious borders. The story of Rama has been transformed into beloved national epics in Indonesia, in Malaysia, the Philippines, in Thailand, Burma, and Cambodian. You may have heard Muslim countries there and Buddhist countries. So there are Buddhist and Jain versions of this tale, as well as Muslim versions of the tale. It can be found throughout South Asia and Southeast Asia in temple architecture, in some of the statuary and the images in temples, in dance, and in drama. In Thailand, food dishes are named for the characters in the Ramayana. In Indonesia, the Ramayana is one of the staples of Javanese shadow puppet theater. And the most popular Hindu holiday, Diwali, or the Festival of Lights, in part commemorates the lighting of the palace lamps when Rama and Sita returned from exile to Ayodhya. On a less happy note, there have been violent disputes in Ayodhya over a plot of land thought to have been the birthplace of Rama, and also the site of a later Muslim mosque that was thought to have been built on a temple on that site. In the 1990s, over 2,000 people were killed in rioting over the issue. As with other sacred texts, the stories and characters of Smriti, what is remembered, matter deeply to many, many people. I suspect that one of the reasons for the astounding popularity of the Ramayana is that it's a fairly straightforward narrative with clear moral meaning, right? Good triumphs over evil, and it ends with peace and prosperity and love, particularly if you conclude the story at the end of book 6, right, with Rama and Sita's return to Ayodhya. But there's another ancient Sanskrit epic, also considered Smriti, that is much longer and more complicated and more morally ambiguous. For these reasons, the Mahabharata is probably even more impressive as a work of literature. The name of that epic, the Mahabharata, means the great epic of the Bharata War. It's the longest poem in the world, weighing in at 75,000 to 100,000 verses, depending on the version, and it's divided into 18 books. It's commonly said to be 7 times the length of the Iliad and the Odyssey combined, or about 4 times longer than the Bible. It's ascribed to the poet Vyasa, who, like Valmiki, is both the author of the epic and he's also a character within it. The Mahabharata has a similar setting to the Ramayana, and it was composed at about the same time, so between 300 BCE and 300 CE, but it's much darker in tone. Where Rama and his brothers show self-sacrifice and deference to preserve harmony in their family, with conflict coming from mostly outside forces, the Mahabharata is a story of a family that tears itself apart and in the process brings ruin upon the whole country. There was once a king with 2 sons. The oldest son, Dhritarashtra, should have been the next ruler, but because he was born blind, the kingdom was given to a younger son, Pandu. Okay, now that may seem unfair to us, that a disability from birth would disqualify one. But remember that the law of karma works here. So disabilities or illnesses are something that comes from previous lives. So this king is probably just not fit for the kingship. So it goes to Pandu. Pandu has 5 sons, or that's what people thought at the time. Their actual fathers turned out to be gods, as we learn in the epic. The sons are Yudhishthira, the son of Dharma personified, Dharma becomes a god, Bhima, who's the strongest of the brothers, Arjuna, the great archer, and then the twins Nakula and Sahadeva. These are the 5 Pandava brothers, right? They're all sons of Pandu. And they were all married to the same woman, the remarkable Draupadi. They grew up with their cousins, who were the 100 sons of Dhritarashtra, and they're described as demons in human form. So even though this epic is going to recount earthly battles between 2 forces coming from different sides of the family, it represents a conflict between gods, or these sons of gods, and demons. When Pandu dies, so he's the king, the blind Dhritarashtra, he's the older son who couldn't become king, he becomes the regent, so he's holding the throne for the next ruler. And naturally, Dhritarashtra's eldest son, that's Duryodhana, is the one who expects to inherit the kingdom. Though Yudhishthira, he's the oldest son of Pandu, the former king, and he's the oldest of all the cousins, has a stronger claim. Okay, I know there's a lot of confusing names in there, but try to keep those straight and I'll repeat them as we go along here. The blind regent divides the realm in 2, right? So that his sons can have some and their cousins, his brother's sons, can have some of this. But that doesn't satisfy Duryodhana, who tries to kill the Pandava brothers by arson, by burning down their house. And he eventually challenges Yudhishthira, the oldest of the Pandava brothers, to a game of dice, with the winner taking all. Spoiler alert, the game is rigged. It's not going to go so well for the Pandava brothers. Yudhishthira, whose dharma does not allow him to back down from a challenge, right? So he has this dharma of a king, and he needs to be forthright and to stand up to challenges. He's also not perfect. In this epic, there really aren't any perfect characters, and he has a weakness for gambling. So he goes into the dice game, and he loses everything, round after round. He loses his brothers and their freedom, so they're going to become servants or slaves to their cousins, and he even loses their shared wife, Draupadi. Draupadi is publicly humiliated when the cousins treat her as a slave and they try to strip off her clothes. But the god Krishna miraculously saves her from such indignity. He actually gives her layers and layers of clothing. So as they pull off clothes, there's more that appears there. So they finally figure out that she must be protected here. Dhritarashtra, he's the regent, right? He's the blind regent. He cancels the match, but the cousins play one more round, with the losers promising to go into exile in the forest for 12 years and then remain in disguise for yet another year. And after that, after those 13 years, then the winners of the dice game will hand over the kingdom and they'll switch places. Okay, one more round, the Pandavas lose yet again. And then after fulfilling the terms of their agreement, so 12 years in exile, a year in disguise, they're ready to go back and claim the kingdom, but as you might expect, the cousins refuse to give up their rule. There are some attempts at negotiations, but Duryodhana refuses to give the Pandava brothers even 5 villages, like it's impossible to negotiate. And here is where Dharma starts to break down. There's just no way of fulfilling duty, and the brothers who control the kingdom, the cousins, are clearly going against Dharma. There seems to be no way out, no alternative but war. On the eve of the battle, Arjuna, right, one of the 5 Pandava brothers, the one who wields the bow, the great archer, he doesn't want to fight, since he knows that in the battle the next day he will be killing relatives and teachers and friends. But the god Krishna, who is acting as his chariot driver, explains that doing one's duty is required by Dharma, right? And Arjuna's duty as a warrior, as a ruler, is to fight when called upon. This famous episode where Krishna is telling Arjuna why he needs to do his duty, even though it's unpleasant or something he doesn't want to do, that episode is known as the Bhagavad Gita. And it's an 18 it's an 18 chapter part of the Mahabharata. It's often read separately from the epic as a whole, and we'll talk about that in the next lecture. In the 18-day war that follows, nearly everyone on both sides dies. And the account of the battle goes on and on and on. The Pandava brothers are victorious, but peace still doesn't come. Several years later, most of their chief allies are slaughtered in a drunken brawl, and Krishna himself is accidentally killed by a hunter. So that Krishna is an avatar of Vishnu, right? He comes into sort of like a human form, not exactly, but he himself will return to heaven. With a heavy heart, Yudhishthira abdicates the throne, leaving the kingdom to a younger kinsman, while he and his 4 brothers and Draupadi try to reach Indra's heaven in the Himalayas. Along the way, everyone dies. Okay, all of the family members die except for Yudhishthira and his devoted dog, who in the end turns out to be the god Dharma, and they both are taken into Indra's heaven. However, Yudhishthira is surprised and shocked to discover his archenemy, Duryodhana, right, the head of his evil cousins, is in heaven, while his own 4 brothers and Draupadi are in hell. Yudhishthira chooses to go to hell to be with his family, and when he makes that choice, the vision dissolves and he's told that he's passed the final test, right? He's put family, or his dharma, duty toward family, above all else, above even the desire for heaven. And because of that, the 5 Pandava brothers and Dharma, and I assume the dog as well, they're all reunited in heaven. I'm afraid that at this point, you might be kind of rolling your eyes at all the strange names and the odd situations and saying to yourself, why exactly should I care about this? Believe me, you should care. My summary doesn't even begin to touch on the poignancy and the richness of this narrative, which includes framing stories, hundreds of subplots and digressions, sacred vows and terrifying curses, and interactions with the gods and the effects of karma from previous lives. The ideal of dharma is constantly sought for and questioned, even as the heroes make terrible mistakes, and the gods themselves encourage humans to act in ways that might seem ethically troubling. Krishna kind of keeps things stirred up a little bit for his own reasons that are perhaps beyond the capacity of humans to understand. The Mahabharata offers plenty of material for thinking about the deepest questions of life. One of its constant refrains is, Dharma is subtle. I have time to introduce just 2 favorite characters. Pandu's first wife, Kunti, had a child with the sun god, before she was married, and that boy, his name is Karna, so it's different than Karma. Karna was raised by lower caste foster parents, right? He was found and then he was the child of a chariot driver. When Duryodhana, the chief of the evil cousins, recognizes Karna's abilities, he befriends him, and then he makes him a king. He elevates him and gives him a position so that he can compete on equal terms with men from the warrior caste. Karna is grateful for that trust shown to him and grace, and he never betrays that trust. He fights with Duryodhana to the bitter end, keeping his word to Duryodhana, even when Krishna informs Karna that he's actually the oldest of the Pandava brothers, right? He didn't even know what his own background was. And Krishna urges him to change sides. He doesn't. Even when Kunti, his mother, finally reveals herself as his true mother, his birth mother. But by that time, it's too late. Karna is still committed to the side that he's chosen. After the last great battle, in a book entirely devoted to the women mourning the loss of their loved ones, okay, imagine a whole book about mourning the victims of battle, Kunti finally tells the 5 brothers that Karna was the 6th brother, the same Karna that they have killed. Imagine when they realize that one of their greatest enemies was actually one of them, was actually their oldest brother. A second character that I really, really like is Draupadi. She's the wife of the 5 Pandava brothers. As usual, the Mahabharata gives multiple explanations for this unusual domestic arrangement. In one story, Arjuna won her as a bride in an archery contest, and when he returned home and told his mother that he'd won a prize, without knowing what it was, she said, "You should share it with your brothers." And then it turned out to be a wife. In another version of the story, we learn that in a previous life, Draupadi had asked the god Shiva to send her a fine husband. But then she got impatient and asked 5 more times. So in her next incarnation, Shiva gave her 5 husbands. Draupadi is more headstrong and strong-willed than Sita, When Draupadi is lost in the game of dice, she berates Yudhishthira with keen logic. And then finally, as she's arguing there, the blind regent Dhritarashtra grants her a wish. What would you like? And she says that Yudhishthira be freed. You deserve a second wish, he says. That my other husbands be free as well, she replies. And then Draupadi is offered yet a third wish, but she turns him down, saying, greed destroys dharma. It's sort of an odd twist. How many stories have you heard about somebody gets 3 wishes? But in this one, she takes 2, and then she says, I don't want the third one. Karna in turn marvels, when the 5 brothers were sinking and drowning, Draupadi became the boat that brought the Pandavas to land. There's a whole lot more. In fact, the Mahabharata declares that whatever is written here may be found elsewhere, but whatever is not found here cannot be anywhere else either. In other words, the Mahabharata contains all the stories in the world in some form or another. Actually, even the story of the Ramayana is retold in Book 3 of the Mahabharata. I'm going to make an unusual recommendation here. Start with a film. My first introduction to the Mahabharata came in a 5-hour TV version directed in 1989 by Peter Brook. And that 5-hour version was actually reduced from a 9-hour stage version. My library, as a public library, had the second videotape, so I began in the middle with no idea what was going on, especially since Brook used an international cast of various races and ethnicities to represent the Pandava brothers. But I was captivated by the calm, graceful movements of the actors, the strong emotions, and the expressiveness of the words and music. I'd never seen anything like it, and I still watch it regularly. I'm not the only one to be impressed by a television production, though. At the same time that Brook was filming his version, a 94-episode Hindi Mahabharata was being broadcast on Indian TV. John Smith, a translator of the Mahabharata, reports that the serial brought the gods themselves into the viewers' homes, and they responded accordingly, burning incense sticks and sprinkling water before their television sets, as they would have done in front of any more traditional shrine. Both the Mahabharata and an earlier 78-episode serialization of the Ramayana were enormously popular. It's reported that during the weekly broadcast, trains and buses stopped running, and entire villages gathered around a single TV set to watch the latest exploits of the gods, heroes, and heroines. If the Ramayana is the more beloved of the 2 epics, the Mahabharata is similarly well-known and pervasive throughout India. Indeed, Bharat is what Indians call their own country. The Mahabharata is a national epic and also a work of profound religious devotion and insight. It's not surprising that it's often referred to as the 5th Veda.